I love it when filmmakers take credit. Like you'll hear an interviewer say, you concentrate a lot on mirrors in your films. And clearly the director has never thought about that in his or her life. And they'll always say, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Mirrors are big for me. That's a big thing because you see your face in them. It's your true self. Yes.
Let's be honest, mirrors are one of the most contrived cliches in all of fiction, and for good reason. It's a shamelessly easy way to indulge in symbolism without having to really think about it, because as Lee Winnell perfectly points out, it's a window into the self, a reflection of our identity, or, in other words, it can be whatever ambiguous empty metaphor you wish it to be. Show a character looking at a broken mirror, boom, it's a metaphor for their fractured soul, or show a character half presented in a mirror, and boom, you have a Rorschach, thus you can allude to whatever psychological theme you want because it's such a fashionably identifiable piece of imagery. But despite how cynical I sound, at the end of the day, it is an accessible, meaningful tool for filmmakers to show rather than tell, and whether you like it or not, it does its job without question. In a way, mirrors are the epitome of symbolism. In fact, anything involving reflection is a grand gesture to how most of storytelling and human nature in general is consumed by the idea of ego and identity. And what better and more obvious way to explore the human psyche than to literally stare at yourself? Hell, the term narcissism derived from a guy who drowned while staring at himself in a puddle. Well, the story is a bit more complicated than that. Anyway, when it comes to horror, mirrors are typically the go-to prop for a cheap jump scare, yet at the same time, it's also the genre most associated with perpetuating its symbolism. The reason mirrors feel less obtrusive in horror movies is because they can indulge greater in the fantasy of what a mirror can be by being legitimately instrumental to the story, which in most cases is to distort reality both psychologically and physically. The horror genre is all about transforming something seemingly ordinary and mundane into our worst nightmares, and with mirrors in particular, they have a way of making us feel vulnerable as if they're persistently watching us. There's an unnaturally voyeuristic presence to mirrors, as they feel like these inescapable, omnipresent objects that follow and survey us everywhere we go. Dare I even say, there's something intrinsically cosmic about them from a superstitious perspective, given their recurring appearance in many urban myths, and well, how much of fiction tends to use them as either a duality between good and bad, or a portal to a parallel dimension. Yet, given how audience sophistication has grown to the point of finding mirror symbolism not only cliched, but even eye-rolling at times, there is one modern horror that genuinely tried to overcome the cliche by doubling down on the cosmic angle I just mentioned. Mike Flanagan's Oculus tells the story of two siblings investigating a mysterious evil mirror that the sister believes is responsible for their family's morbid destruction. And as the night goes on, the film takes on the trickster mindset of the mirror and distorts our understanding of time and reality. So let's talk about it. However, just before we dive into it, since this technically involves mirrors, there is no better time to tell you that this video is sponsored by Harry's. Look, I'm just trying to lighten the mood before we get into the misery stuff. Since lockdown, I've gotten pretty lazy with my shaving game, and thankfully the lads at Harry's have stepped in to help me improve my appearance just before I venture back into the world, within reason. As someone with sensitive skin and typically cuts his face up with the blade, Harry's clean, simple, efficient razor means I've been having a far smoother, easier shave without getting a rash or losing any more blood. This inexpensive, comfortable razor even has refills starting at just $2 and gets shipped right to your doorstep, which is pretty convenient given the current circumstances. Harry's is a 100% money-back guarantee, so if you want to try it out for yourself, I suggest redeeming your trial set at just $3 by going to harrys.com/RyanH, where you will also be helping out the channel as well. Look, let's not beat around the bush here, I seriously need sponsors to make content like this. So go get your starter kit today and join the 10 million others who tried Harry's for themselves, and let me know what you think. Anyway, while you're ordering your cheeky wee razors, let's talk about some spooky evil mirrors. Huh, that rhymed. On paper, I will say, Oculus doesn't sound like it aspires to much, but it's actually one of the most deceptive mainstream horror movies to emerge in recent memory because, while it seems like your typical spooky horror house hijinks, which yes, it does fall into that in places, it's elevated by a modest yet powerful human drama at the centre of it all. Now, I will admit, I do have my fair share of issues with the film, which can be broadly summarised as being its occasional cop-out to conventional scare tactics, and the sort of direct way in which it concludes, but I'll address that in the end. The key distinction between Oculus and many other films of a similar nature is that it's one of the only horror movies to treat the mirror as a living, breathing monster, as opposed to something that exists purely for psychological gimmicks. Mike Flanagan's approach was to create a mirror that teeters on something Lovecraftian, in that we don't ever get an explanation for the mirror's origins, and our exposition is simplified down to a series of bizarre deaths linked to a mirror that's seemingly omnipotent and able to transform and manipulate everything around it. But where things get interesting is how the plot is structured around not one, but two unreliable narrators. The film meticulously intercuts between two timelines, one being the two siblings Kaylee and Tim witnessing their parents fall victim to the mirror in horrific ways, and the other being the siblings reuniting to prove the mirror's supernatural powers before destroying it once and for all. You have to genuinely pay attention to the details and time lapses because the film, like the mirror, loves to play tricks on you and make you question whether things are truly supernatural or just the product of two troubled siblings succumbing to their devastating trauma. In fact, one of the scarier elements of the story is the instability between both siblings. One is clearly unhinged and paranoid about the mirror's presence, and the other just recently got out of a psychiatric hospital after killing their father in self-defense as a child, so you're left rather dubious over which of them is the more rational of the two, which to my understanding is neither of them.
Are you saying you remember it happening that way? Are you really saying that?
Why not?
You're wrong. I saw Mom lock him in the office and I sat outside that door all day and nobody went in or out.
The idea behind using a mirror as the driving force for the story is that it's a sort of metatextual device to critique the symbolism associated with mirrors. One of the main arguments the siblings have is whether the mirror is in fact evil or whether they're just channeling their trauma onto it to make sense of the bizarre and bewildering circumstances that saw their mother become completely deranged, leading their father to murder her.
We were just kids. We made up a scary story so we wouldn't have to accept the fact that our father was a murderer. He was. He was a sick man who tortured and killed our...
It encapsulates most of the major themes associated with mirrors, most notably obsession and the duality between the siblings taking on hereditary characteristics of their parents as the mirror gradually consumes them. For example, the mirror makes their mother Moreira think that her body is decaying, igniting her paranoia and obsession, which is then channeled into adult Kaylee, who is now paranoid and obsessed with the mirror, while adult Tim, like his father, tries to dismiss everything as ridiculous, despite the fact he's also being manipulated by the mirror without knowing it.
2002.
You know, there's a huge difference between causation and correlation.
I know the difference, thank you.
Okay, then in 2001, Mom and Dad bought that new couch. Same year, Grandpa had a heart attack, Robbie Schultz got hit by a car, and our cat ran away. How much of that do you blame on that couch?
Can I get back to this now?
The way it intercuts between both timelines, especially in the latter half where they begin to blend in with each other, really gets across the feeling of detachment and trauma the siblings have been left with. The story is absolutely a tragedy, one where this happy, relatable family completely disintegrates without clear reason, and as the young siblings watch all of this unfold, they are powerless to help, leading to a truly inconceivable outcome that sees them both separated. Intercutting both timelines also helps to show how childhood trauma has deeply affected their adult lives in polar opposite ways. One receives therapy to overcome and live with their grief and guilt, while the other represses it and bottles their energy into hunting down an antique mirror that she irrationally blames for her personal destruction. The thing is, the supernatural stuff is only alluded to in Keely's perspective, while Tim tries to disprove her theories as having a logical explanation. For example, Keely sees her father with a mysterious woman who she thinks was a manifestation created by the mirror, while Tim thinks it's her channeling a delusion because she refuses to believe her father was having an affair.
Our father was a cheater and it drove our mother crazy.
Stop it.
He snapped and he killed her, was gonna do the same to us.
Oh, yeah.
He was withdrawn, secretive, all signs of an affair.
I had access to all of Mom and Dad's stuff. While you were getting brainwashed, I looked, and not one credit card receipt, phone call, flower order, nothing to suggest an affair.
You're smart enough not to leave a trail.
That's where the story gets really clever with its differing perspectives. For Keely, it's believable that her parents' increasingly strained and psychotic behaviour are caused by the mirror, but from Tim's eyes, or at least what the doctors try and make him believe, it's just as plausible that the parents grew resentful of each other to the point of abuse and eventually murder. Where the film navigates the art of the horror movie mirror is by seemingly downplaying its presence, while having Keely persistently build it up to be this powerful entity, thus inferring to the idea that the mind makes it so. You're led to believe by Keely that this mirror is capable of evil things, yet it's never anything more than just a mirror. What makes it a tense film to watch is how you really do feel dragged between two perspectives without any certainty. Like, you want to believe Keely's theory that the mirror is responsible for controlling their father and making him a murderer, but saying that out loud sounds ridiculous, as Tim rightfully points out. Furthermore, just the premise of symbolism is brought into question when Tim rebukes Keely's theory about the deaths being related to the mirror as a biased selection of accounts that fit her narrative and ignore all the other evidence that contradicts it. Again, in Keely's world, she's giving this mirror power despite there never being any proof of its power. Sure, we see the mirror manipulating everything, but again, how do you prove that? The film acknowledges this human desire, hell, desperation to obtain meaning to justify your behaviour. Keely simply can't accept that her parents just abruptly went mad, and so the overwhelming toll it's had on her makes her want to believe that surely the answer lies beyond conventional logic. However, where the film gets contentious with me is in the climax, where despite trying to present its story from two conflicting perspectives, it clearly leans on one over the other. As such, all the supernatural stuff begins to overshadow the psychological elements, where at first it's very much plausible that these two psychologically disturbed individuals are just losing their minds all over again, and nothing supernatural is actually happening. But then it kinda throws this all out the window. In the conclusion, Tim releases a kill switch to destroy the mirror, which is very blatantly alluded to the entire film that it's no surprise when it's revealed that Keely was standing in front of the mirror this entire time, thus the mirror made it look like Tim deliberately murdered Keely, mirroring the exact same ending as when younger Tim was taken away after killing his father. I guess you could say it does try to maintain the premise that it could possibly all be psychological, but then the film throws these weird mirror ghosts at you, which pretty much confirms that the mirror is actually evil, unless you wish to believe that they're all in Tim's head. To end this video, let me just say, mirror symbolism is near impossible to define considering how broad it is, yet in the horror genre, I think it's more about what it represents more so than what it necessarily does. Giving life, power, or purpose to something, especially inanimate innocuous objects, feeds on an inherent human fear of insignificance and loneliness, on top of existential anxieties about the self. It might be an overused trope in fiction, but it's universally relatable. We constantly stare at our reflection, whether it be in a mirror or a puddle, or even the device you're watching this video on. Hi there. In the case of Oculus, Mike Flanagan uses mirrors as a way to figuratively and literally challenge how we see the world around us. As cliche as it obviously sounds, the mirror is used as a tool for the characters to reflect on their trauma and experiences, whether they see things for how they truly are, or how they choose to embrace the imitation of reality they wish was true. At the end of it all, the mirror becomes the symbol of this family's destruction because it sees everything. It's unquestionably objective, it's a live portrait of the moment, and ultimately it taps into your personal insecurities and will always and forever show you things that you wish simply were not true.